Hi, welcome to our podcast. We are sisters. My name is Shainy Fetterman,
I'm Chavi Fink.
and we decided to start a podcast about our experience raising kids that are neurodivergent. We have a couple different diagnoses between us, ASD, ADHD, and we just wanted to talk about our experience and just share what it's like, the ins and outs of raising kids on the spectrum and all types of neurodivergence. And I think we've been talking about doing this for a while because we talk all the time anyway. Mm-hmm. We're always talking about just our daily life, whatever we're dealing with, different therapies, and we thought, it could actually be interesting if people could actually listen and watch and hear our conversations. So I guess today we're going to talk about all the reasons why. I guess we just want to be another voice. There's a lot of different voices out there now, slowly coming out. But so let me ask you, Javi, why do you want to do this?
That's a good question. Because you asked. No. You definitely opened my eyes a lot about taking the stigma away from the word autism. I want to talk about my experiences with raising kids that are neurodivergent and, the cute and the hard.
I think that when it's like an open conversation and I think it makes people feel less alone. There's a lot of people that have children that are either on the spectrum or otherwise neurodivergent. And I think that it could be really scary when you first find out that your child is a little bit different or you're experiencing challenges. And sometimes you could feel like you're the only one. And I just think we need more voices out there that are willing to talk about just all these differences and what it's really like day in, day out. And I think a big thing for me, there's a lot of different things, but I'll just start with that there is a lot of shame when you hear that word. I know that when I was first on the journey of figuring out when my child had certain delays and I was figuring out what exactly was going on, the word autism really scared me. It was like, no, it can't be that. Like, it could be speech delay, it could be sensory issues, it could be social struggles, but the word autism really it felt so heavy. And I believe that it's in part due to what I've just seen in society and even experience. For example, I remember talking about different delays and things that my son was having, and somebody said, "Oh, yeah, I know a cousin that also had some sensory delays and some speech delays, but they're not on the spectrum." And I experienced that more than once. I'd spoken to multiple people, and they always made sure to let me know if they were not on the spectrum. Don't worry, they're not on the spectrum. So to me, that just communicated that would be really bad. If they were on the spectrum, that would be the worst thing. And so certainly after I found out that my son was on the spectrum, I just had this feeling of it's this big, terrible thing. And so that's one reason for me, just to I feel that if we talk about it more, it kind of takes away some of that fear and perhaps some of the shame that some people may be experiencing. And first of all, I'm definitely I acknowledge that not everybody has that. I definitely spoke to moms that had no shame about it, and they were just like, "Yeah, this is my kid, and it's all good," and they're very just integrated with it and feel fine about it. But there's definitely, as a society, I think that there is this thing with that word. We don't want that to be a descriptor for our kids. So
saying your kid has ADHD is not as scary as saying your kid has autism. So that's also a big one for me that I wanted to discuss, because why is ADHD not as not as big of a deal. I think that people don't really understand what ADHD is, actually. I don't think people understand that. A lot of people have ADHD, which is like an autism diagnosis, and ADHD diagnosis, which, is actually really hard on people because I'm no expert on any of this, but
Neither of us are professionals in like therapy. We're not, we're not experts in this field at all. We're just moms that have experience with our kids. And I think that's kind of that's the vibe here. Like, we're not trying to give advice. We may have some advice to offer and just our experiences, but just because we're saying it doesn't mean we think this is the end all be all. And we're experts in our kids. We're not experts on autism or ADHD or neurodivergence at all, but we do have some real interesting nuggets, and we're processing all this ourselves. And I just think it's important to just like give people a window into what it's really like, and the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, there's some good parts too. And like, yeah, what you're saying with ADHD, like, people do feel more, somehow it became like a safer word. I remember even like when I was younger, I remember when ADHD it wasn't as cool as it is now. Not saying it, I'm not trying to minimize what ADHD is, but it is a little bit more acceptable to have ADHD, and people are a lot more comfortable. It rolls off their tongue a lot easier than autism does. And I think it would be awesome if autism is also able to roll off people's tongues a little bit easier and not looked at as like this big scary thing. And I'm not saying it's not scary. It is scary. It is serious, and it is a spectrum, and there are those with very high support needs and lower support needs. And I want to acknowledge that people that are raising children with higher support needs, that's hard. And like, I'm not saying that it's not a big deal, but whatever way you slice it, I do think we need to not be so scared of the word and just have an open conversation about it.
Yeah, and I actually think that thanks to social media, there are certain creators that I'm going to specifically talk about, like adult creators that are like, yeah, I have autism, and they like own it, and they are really cool people, and they kind of share nuggets of their life and talk a bit about their childhood and stuff. And I think that's also a big part of what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm raising neurodivergent children, and I am definitely, still navigating, like, telling them like that, their differences are their superpowers, or, things like that. And I do think that we are on the way of making autism not as scary of a word as ADHD is not as scary of a word.
Just speaking to like what you were saying about your kids and raising them to just like be accepting of themselves. And I think for me, what kept going over and over in my head as I was processing, finding out my son is on the spectrum, and just the word autism and everything that comes with it, one thing that just was very painful was that just how the world sees it. Like, I could be open with somebody and they might say, oh yeah, my nephew's autistic, or my son is, or whatever it was. And then some people would be like, I'm so sorry. And it's like so heavy and whatever. I just feel like I want to raise my child in a world where they are just comfortable with who they are. They can share that they're autistic, and it doesn't have to be such a big thing. It could just be like a fun fact, or just like a part of who they are, but doesn't have to define who they are. And I don't want, whether or not somebody, let's say there are people that are able to kind of get away with, they can get through life kind of without sharing that they're on the spectrum because they are functional and they can kind of skate by in school. Maybe they had some social issues. Maybe they don't always get the joke. Maybe there's some hints, but they can kind of skate by. But people kind of realize they're a little bit different, maybe a little bit quirky, or whatever word you want to use. And they probably realize it too in themselves. But, but there's like this shame of like, wait, I'm different, but I don't really know why. And I think what I really want to do is I want my son to just kind of know okay, this is why I struggle with this, or this is why I struggle with that. And it doesn't mean something so scary. It doesn't have to be such a big, heavy thing. It could just be just a part of who he is. And
Yeah. And it's making me think how there are people that have anxiety and OCD and things like that are, even though people aren't like, hi, I'm Chavi, nice to meet you, I have anxiety, you know, they're not like saying that. That's kind of the balance I'm also trying to learn of, like, does it need to be so much part of their identity, or, you know, I'm just thinking out loud, I'm just talking about it. Like, it doesn't have to be like in the introduction, but it's kind of like if it comes up, or like if, you know, let's say my son is like getting really fixated on something specific, it would be really nice to just be like, yeah, like his brain is a little bit different. Like, he has autism or he has ADHD. It's just, it can help people understand more. It doesn't have to be something scary. It's like, if I say that, you can't just be like, oh my God. Like, that's not like, it's not, oh my God. It's like, okay, wow. I understand that he's going to process things a little differently, or he looks at the world a little differently. That's how I'm trying to view it. What do you think?
right. No, I hear that. And also I want to honor, I just want to throw it out there too. Like, I honor the fact that, like, if somebody doesn't want to say their diagnosis, like, that's totally cool. Like, if they want to say neurodivergent, if they want to say a different word, like, I get it. Like, I'm not saying you have to. We're not calling for people that you have to, but I'm just saying if more people were just like casually open about it, then it wouldn't be so scary, and we wouldn't be mincing words and saying neurodivergent. Neurodivergent feels safer too. It just does.
Why? Why does it feel safe?
Because it just doesn't feel autistic. Just feels like it's just I guess when it was, we used to see autism as very one-dimensional. I think when growing up, like when I heard of that somebody was autistic, it was very much the higher support needs only. And now I think we're talking more about how there are a lot of people that don't seem, or they don't appear as high support needs, but they maybe have real support needs, and it's valid. Their diagnosis is valid too. I think we kind of we swing back and forth. It's like, we don't want to take away from the fact that there are people with very high support needs, but we don't want to take away from the fact that autism can look very different. It can look a range of different ways, and it's all valid.
We are trying to take away the stigma and the shame from the word. I think that's the bottom line. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to share a story that my husband talks about all the time, about his father, my father-in-law, who I never got to meet. He passed away when my husband was a teenager, but he shares this story quite frequently, and it kept coming up again and again when I was processing my son's diagnosis and how I want to raise him. So the story goes that so my father-in-law was very interested in the Native American culture, a specific tribe. Forgive me, I don't remember the name of it, but basically he was going to kind of join that tribe, and he went to the Indian chief, and the Indian chief said to him, "Why do you want to join our tribe?" And he said, there's two types of Native Americans. There's the ones that cut their hair, they don't wear the traditional clothing, they are maybe an alcoholic and with their head down and ashamed of who they are. And then I see the Native Americans that embrace their heritage, that have the feathers in their hair, and their hair is long, and they're proud of who they are. And I want to be that type of Native American. And the chief looks at him and he said, "Well, what culture do you come from? What's your background?" And he said, I was actually born Jewish. I'm Jewish." And the chief looks at him and he says, "There's two types of Jews. There's one with their head down and ashamed of who they are, and there's those that with their head held high, and they're proud of their heritage. They're proud of who they are. Go be that type of Jew." And so my father-in-law, after that, that's when he met Chabad rabbi, and he became closer to Judaism, and went back to his roots. And so it's such a powerful story. But that story kept going over in my head again and again and again when I was thinking about my son. I'm like, you have autism, you're neurodivergent, it's part of who you are. and it's clear there's something different from the outside. It's clear that there's something different, like on the inside, or as he gets, he's still really young, but like I'm sure as he gets older, he'll feel that there's a difference. So whether or not you acknowledge the word, it's still there. And so I really know in my heart, when I kept thinking about that story, I'm like, I want him to be the type of person, the type of autistic person that is proud of who they are. Like, let it be a superpower, even if it's challenging. Again, he's still young. I don't know if he's going to have higher support needs or lower support needs, or maybe he'll have higher support needs in one area, lower support needs in the other area. I'm still not, I don't even know, because that's kind of how it is when your child is young. Of course, I'm going to try my best to help him get to his highest potential. But again, whatever it is, I want him to be proud of who he is and not with his head held down. I want his head to be high, and him to be like just a part of who he is, and like own it. I want him to own it. Like, just like when you see people that own all the parts of themselves, it's just there's some sort of wholeness there, and I want him to feel whole and be whole. So that whenever I'm feeling scared or worried about what people think or whatever it is, go to like a darker place, that story always centers me. And that's the goal. That's what I want. No matter what the outcome, no matter what we're dealing with, I don't want him to be ashamed. And I will admit that, like, when I first started on this journey of parenting a child on the spectrum, I really did go to shame. But if I have the shame, certainly he's going to have it, and he'll feel that. And so I deeply don't want that.
Two things. One is you are very in the beginnings, and I've been doing this for a while, even though I wouldn't call myself a veteran, but I've had a lot of time to process things, especially because I got over a lot of like the toddlerhood, the tantrums that go on in toddlerhood. Like when you're like really in that, there's just like a lot of layers to having a child on the spectrum. But what I want to say is I feel like I have always been pretty open about the struggles that they have, and social skills things. I've always just been very open about that with them, and I have ways to go for sure. And
from what I remember, it doesn't feel like you had this type of shame spiral thing that I went through.
And I wonder if it's also like, even though we're only 6 years apart and she's older, but I wonder if it's also
had to point that out.
I need to make sure that I think it could be the day and age that we grew up in. That's a little bit different. No, because I think that the stigma of ADHD wasn't so intense like as I grew up, as it was when you grew up. I think people spoke more openly about it. I'm just like thinking. I'm like thinking as we're talking.
So when I grew up in the 1800s, and you were born 6 years later. No, but you're right. We even like starting this podcast, like the tech. She's like in charge of the tech, because even though I know how to use apps and iPhones, but there's the 6 year difference. It's crazy. Like, you definitely have more of a knack for this type of stuff.
Yeah,
I just feel like. Yeah, maybe that is part of why, you were in different personalities. Yeah, I think I get things fall really heavy on me. That's part of my personality. When something happens, I tend to like kind of go inside myself and retreat and kind of marinate over it. Yeah. That's just how I process. It's always how I've been.
And I feel like I'm a pretty open book. Like I'll like vent about things like very openly. I think I've just known from like when he was so young that like he is wired differently, and I just jumped right into. I also am very much like I just jump into fix it mode, right? And I just like, I don't know, just did that. So I think also just having more years of processing what things are like, and I'm still. I mean, where I was a year ago and where I am now is like, so it's like like light years apart. But when you have more distance, you kind of, it feels lighter. I think another difference between us is that you're
you started, like, your oldest child is the one with differences. And for me, my first three kids, it was just a very, I guess, regular trajectory. And my youngest is the one that is on the spectrum. So so that it was kind of like I was going in one way, and then all of a sudden it was like just kind of came out of nowhere. Like so
Yeah, and I think also I really want to create a podcast that I would love to have listened to during it. That's really like, you know, you don't really see that. It's like we're sisters, we're moms. You know, we have typical children, we have neurodivergent children. Like it's just, I think it's fun. Like it'll be fun to listen and very educational. And
I would have loved to be like a fly on the wall to like two friends, two sisters. Yeah, sisters. And I'm sure there's maybe other podcasts like this out there, or other, TikTok pages or social media pages. But I just feel like
our unique perspective.
Yeah, just to kind of talk about it you'll hear I'm probably the more heavier one, and it'll be light sometimes. And you could kind of hear the whole range of like, there is heaviness to it, and there's also lightness and fun. Like sometimes like our kids say the cute or do the cutest things that are so different, and and it's just like funny, like just the quirks, and like, oh, of course, they had to do it that way or differently. And like when you get your children, you learn about like the different special interests and about like all the just like the way they see the world so differently and so uniquely. It's like really fascinating and really cool, and like kind of joining their universe is just so
they're the light. They're like the lights of our lives for real. They are, and we have so much fun together, like raising our kids together. We really want people to see just how amazing, kids that are neurodivergent and just think differently, is how amazing they are, and so that you can also understand people in the world better too.
That too.
We have something that a lot of people don't. We have a certain openness that other people don't. I really want to share that with people, just to understand that not everybody thinks the way you do, and yes, it, like you said earlier, like it is scary, but it's also really beautiful and fun. And I really hope it just changes the way schools look at children. That is like a whole,
and also look at them as individuals. Just because you hear the word autism, it doesn't necessarily mean
we can't accommodate
that they, number one, that they can't have accommodations for that child. But first of all, just because you hear that word, it doesn't mean but also it doesn't mean that they don't belong in a regular school. It doesn't. It could mean that. It could be that school doesn't have what that child needs, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Like I think schools should just look at children as individuals, and that you could consider that component and look at them as individuals. Not everybody with autism has behavioral issues. Not everybody has such serious social issues. Maybe it's more mild, but it's just good to kind of have that openness and realize that everybody's different. And I think also we talked about before that there is some people not scared of having a child that's autistic, but like some people are actually scared of autistic children. And that I want to like kind of open people's eyes to, and like, that like we talked about how like, people at the park, they're scared of a child that seems different, acts different. And it's normal. It's human nature to kind of be a little bit nervous, but just to kind of
and teach our kids how like that. Not, it doesn't even need to be such a like okay, some kids are different, some kids aren't. It's just something that is just like part of life. Like if you see a kid is spinning in circles at the park, or like comes over to you and just kind of like touches your stuff without asking, like just talk to them like they're a kid. Oh, hey, you like my toys, that's awesome, instead of just like grabbing it and walking away. Like, I don't know.
And there's different things too that we can get into, but about, you can even teach your children that if a child is acting differently, like maybe join them, maybe start spinning with them. I think like I had two experiences with my son where one was with my nephew, and he just my son was kind of running back and forth repetitively, and my neurotypical nephew just kind of went and started running back and forth with him, and then he kept opening the shutters and closing them, and then my nephew's was just opening and closing. He just joined his little world. What a beautiful thing. The joy and happiness that I felt just watching that. First of all, my son was like so first of all, it helped him. Like socially, it's sometimes difficult, but when that child was able to join my son, they were both having a great time, and it was such a great opportunity for my son to have like social interaction, and it gave my nephew like such joy, and he was having a great time too. And he felt so good about himself after, because I was like, thank you. You did you were so great with him. And because he's older than him too. And then I had another experience with a little girl who just joined in on my son, who was like playing kind of strangely with magnetiles, like not like building up, but kind of just like lining them up, and or just whatever it was, just playing different. And she kind of looked at him. She looked what he was doing, and she's like, oh, okay. Like, that's what we're doing. And so she joined in with him, and he was happy and she was happy. And it was just, what a beautiful thing. Like, maybe to help teach people, like, you can join their little, funky behavior, or not behavior. They're just their way of doing things, their way of experiencing the world. That's another like beautiful thing that I think we can teach parents of neurotypical kids.
Yeah, I love that. And I find that a lot of times my kids do gravitate towards the clearly neurodivergent children in the park, which is great. It's great too. I'm like, maybe he should consider if he wants to join the neurotypical children in the park. Like, maybe they're the ones that we should be wary of. I'm just kidding.
Maybe they're too normal. Sometimes I feel like as I'm raising my kid, as I'm raising my child and learning so much about what it is to be autistic, I definitely have some traits that I can relate to. And sometimes I always kind of gravitate towards the people that are a little bit quirky. I definitely have some of the traits, and sometimes I'm like, well, I can't put my finger on it, but that person's like a little too normal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there is something safe about people that have just the little quirks, and maybe I feel safer. Maybe not everybody does, yeah. but that's funny.
No, I completely agree with you. I love that too. And I think that I definitely was one of the quirkier ones growing up. And that's why I feel like I understand my son very, very well. I relate to him on a lot of different levels. And I'm so glad that he has a safe home that he can be himself. But
this could be a whole episode of like talking about our traits that we have that we can relate to our kids on, and we can definitely explore that. But I also think that maybe talking about this openly will help not only parents of children that are neurodivergent, but also it could help maybe help adults that maybe were never diagnosed, and maybe it could help them understand themselves. I think just because that's kind of what we're alluding to, like, like I under certain traits that I experience or have, I understand more looking at my son, looking at and seeing just how he experiences the world. So I think it's really just to kind of give a peek into the world of moms raising kids with a different filter of how they process the world. And so I hope you'll join, and we're really excited.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.